For the average Gen Z man in the West, you've grown up in an environment where you've just been told that you're for being a man. For some reason, Gen Z women seem to think that they're the most oppressed generation that has ever lived. They behave like they're horrible. It is outright sexism and misandry.
I can imagine them listening to us now and just being outraged, genuinely seething to hear you say that.
Of them, and it is ironic as well, like you said, because these people that always shit on the masks, they want to fuck them. You know, it is.
You know, obviously a lot of the work you do is geared towards young men, right? And this ties in quite well to what I talk about, because I talk a lot about the gender discourse, the crazy trans stuff, and how I think as a society we've sort of been gaslit into believing that there's no difference innately between men and women. You know, it's all a social construct. There's a push towards men being more feminine, women being more masculine. So I guess, how do you feel about that? And, you know, being a man in his 20s growing up here, did that affect you in terms of, you know, how men and women are being portrayed?
Yeah, of course. You know, selfishly, the part of the reason that I stand up for men, and when I introduced myself, I probably should have said I do see myself as a men's activist as well. Part of the reason for that is because of my own experience growing up as a man. And as far as I see it, for the average Gen Z man in the West, you've grown up in an environment where you've just been told that you're shit for being a man. It's what we know. And there has been a very clear double standard where women, the other sex, have been told that they're wonderful and amazing and all the problems in the world are the result of men. And that's moved us away from the fundamental truth that both masculinity and femininity as universal energies are equal. Like, they are equal. They serve as a balancing act, and neither one is better than the other. But the narrative has very much been pushed that women are better. Now, obviously, throughout the history, it wasn't that way at all. We did live in a patriarchal society and women were oppressed. But we don't have that today. But for some reason, Gen Z women seem to think that they're the most oppressed generation that has ever lived, right? And for a lot of them, that has given them this excuse to just be total cunts, like to. So I don't know if I can say that on your podcast. You have to bleep it out.
No, go ahead.
They behave like cunts. They behave like cunts. They're horrible. A lot of women, the way that they are to men, and it is outright sexism and misandry. But they've been told that that is okay because you are the oppressed one. And it's a huge part of the reason that men are turning to these figures like Tate and these figures on the right and trying to get in touch with masculinity again, because most men feel it. Most men are in touch with their masculinity, but they've been told that that's a bad thing and they shouldn't do it. So obviously they're going to say, no, like, this just does not feel right. Like, I know this, I feel this intuitively. I am a man. Stop telling me that I'm bad for being that. I know that's not a particularly specific answer, but as a general summary, yeah, no. Men get treated like shit, and they have a lot of inequalities and a lot of problems, and they don't get listened to. And at university, when I was there, it was the worst for it, man. That was the peak of it during Me Too. But we're seeing the backlash now.
Yeah, it's so funny because I've looked into this a lot, and even as a gay man, I feel it myself in terms of the past couple of years, really getting back in touch with the qualities of masculinity that I had rejected, because, you know, you obviously have this behavior from women and men, you know, saying all masculinity is toxic, that kind of stuff. But within gay men as well, especially in cities like London, they look down on the mask type of gay men. Like, within gay men, there's different, you've probably noticed there's different kind of subcultures. Yeah. And the liberal gays, they almost kind of try and push each other towards being more feminine in the way they dress and behave, even though at the end of the day, they all know, like, gay men are attracted to masculinity. So even though they'll kind of talk down these mask gays and stuff, then you find out who they've been fucking, and it's, you know, it's like a Trump supporter type guy. So I'm passionate too about this in terms of helping gay men find out, well, what does masculinity mean? Because I think you're put into kind of a weird space with those two things combined.
Yeah.
And I think with what we're talking about, it's so kind of common sense and uncontroversial, but these kind of woke women that you're talking about, I can imagine them listening to us now and just being outraged. Like some of the stuff you said, like that they look down on men. They think all of the world's problems are men. You know, that's so true. But some of them will feel genuinely seething to hear you say that, because they've been told that this is all correct.
Yeah. Well, and if there are any women who do watch this and they hear this, I'll say this straight up. You need to fucking listen. You are not better than men. You are equivalent. You are not better. And you need to be reminded of that. Like I've had to deal with this so much, man. Just the entitlement, the superiority complex. And you look at the way that these people, they talk about things, you know, for example, the way that they always refer to it as men. It's, why do men do this? They categorize the entire gender. They hold the entire gender collectively responsible for things. I saw this on LinkedIn, can be one of the fucking worst for it. Right. Somebody the other day, they were talking about getting unsolicited DMs on LinkedIn, which, you know, is a real thing. A lot of men have very poor self-regulation over their libido, and they do behave in a way that isn't appropriate and acceptable. And that's gay men and straight men. I'm frequently on the receiving end of it with gay men on my social media, and women will get it even more because obviously there's more straight men. But this woman, you know, she put this post up. Why do men think it's okay? It's, for fuck's sake, it's not that men think it's okay. The majority of men don't. And men actually look down on the men that send these creepy DMs and behave in that way. It's men that are going to protect you against these people. It's so overlooked. The number of cases of men doing acts of heroic acts, right? George the Tin Man, the men's influencer on Instagram, regularly talks about this. Rutger Bregman in his book Humankind, he talks about the amount of examples of men acting in a heroic way, and it doesn't get any coverage. But there's a lot of women, and again, let's use the right terms. There are a lot of women, not women as a whole. There are a lot of women who seem to think that it's okay to talk about the entire gender as if we are responsible for the bad things. And then when you call them out on it, it's a retreat to, I'm the victim. How could you possibly say that? And this is the result of Me Too feminism and the fourth wave and the way that it operates, because again, it is a manipulative and intolerant ideology built on social control and fear and stigmatization of the other sex, but in the name of progressivism. And it's not progressive. It's the counter to it. It's not feminist. It's the counter to gender equality. It's intolerant, sexist, and vicious. And usually as well, another thing I'll just say, and that there's data that's shown this research, heavily narcissistic, heavily narcissistic. You know, so there's some girl who, when they were 18, a boy played them and treated her like shit, which isn't okay. But now the entire gender of men are responsible for that because you've not learned to process the trauma and the pain that you've got from that relationship. And now you're into this political activism that says the entire gender is responsible for the fact that you haven't dealt with your own internal pain. And this is where the narcissism comes through with it. It's all me. Fuck off. Like, it does my head in, man. It does my head in.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I've heard countless conversations in quote unquote queer spaces, especially, where honestly the straight white male is the devil. And, you know, now with Trump getting rid of this DEI stuff and everyone having a melt, to people that I know who possibly don't know too much about this, and they say, how could this be a good thing? It sounds like they're getting rid of things that combat racism. And then I explain, well, what we're actually seeing now is discrimination towards straight white men. And even me saying that, they're like, oh God, this is uncomfortable. You know, is that possible? Is it possible to discriminate against straight white men? And then one thing I think helps them understand a little bit is, you know, what we learn about the past of women oppression, the patriarchy, if you want to use that term, even that, is sort of, it's a concept, but now it's sort of taught as just fact. A lot of these things are sort of theories, if you know what I mean. And I think that's one of the issues. But we can talk about the injustices towards women from men in the past, which there are many, and rightly so, we should acknowledge them. And in current day, domestic violence, all these things going on. But I think what people don't understand is, if you blame a 21-year-old man who has done nothing wrong in his life, has worked hard, gone to uni, whatever he's done, if you blame him for like the history of how women have been treated and say, because of this now, it's harder for you to get a job, you have to do better than women and black people and, gay people just to get the same position. And in some cases, like in the media, like there may be things that you never got offered. People are still, the kind of progressive people, I think, they're still not getting that is just not fair. And it's not how we solve one disparity by just disparaging another,
It's because they're brainwashed. They're bigoted. They are ignorant. They do not know what they're talking about. They will not listen to the full picture, because if they did, it might make them think differently. It's no different to religious people that are fundamentalist. There is an argument that the decline of religion in the way that it gave people moral guidance has now been replaced by fundamentalist political ideologies like wokeism. And you also have it on the right as well, with the anti-woke, whatever you want to call them, like the alt-right. I know people don't really use that term anymore.
Yeah.
But wokeism is a religion. It is a fundamentalist way of thinking that refuses to acknowledge counter evidence and actively tries to silence it and shut it down and label it as being dangerous, right? Because if you actually see the data and the facts and hear other perspectives, it's likely to move people away. And again, that's why the narcissists, because they want to control people, because they lack control in their own lives. They have their own trauma and pain that they've not resolved. And this is why there's such a distinct correlation with woke political thought and mental illness as well, like anxiety levels, depression, right? It's not a healthy way to think. And what you were saying with the queer community, I'm a massive fan of techno, right? I love techno music, and I used to go to places like Fold in London. I used to go to Unfold, a queer event. I've been clubbing multiple times in Berlin. I love the Berlin techno scene. You and I both know what it's like. The queer community are some of the most intolerant people you're ever going to meet, because if you don't fit the category of what is right, what is tolerable, then they fucking despise you. And they just can't see this, again, because they are completely brainwashed. They live in an echo chamber surrounded by people who just reaffirm the same things again and again and again. And they're just, a lot of them are just, they're insufferable. And, I really feel for people that are in the LGBTQ plus community that don't align with this, because as you said, they can be so intolerant of them. And it is ironic as well, like you said, because these people that always shit on the masks, they want to fuck them. It's fucking it's
very true.
Like, I get it myself. I remember, like, when I used to read my comments on TikTok, that I don't anymore, and I haven't for about a year and a half. Like, I would have these very, very, like, femme boys, very twinky boys, like, being sassy and bitchy in the comments. But there would always be one who'd be saying something like, "Oh, shame you're so hot." Like, "Oh, your political opinions are horrible. Shame you're so hot, but your political opinions suck." I'm like, "Oh, just fuck off, mate." Like, they're just such hypocrites. They're just utter idiots, the people that think this way. And, I don't know what you can do, because it's basically the equivalent of them standing with your fingers in your ear when you try to talk to these people, which is why now I just try to ridicule them and just call them out and say the things that are going to offend them, because they need to hear this shit. Somebody needs to tell them, no, you are behaving like a dick and you think like an imbecile.
Totally. I mean, if you've seen any of my content, I do a hell load of that. I think, but before kind of digging into the queer angle a little bit more, in terms of kind of you know, I feel like women are being told that men of a certain type are toxic and undesirable, which basically means that men with strong masculine qualities who've nurtured their masculinity and, you know, nurtured the good parts of it are actually undesirable. So that's a message being sent. But then maybe are there times when you're demonized because of, you know, standing up for your masculinity, but then, you know, in secret, a lot of women that's what they're actually looking for. You know what I mean? Like, women are being convinced you want these kind of feminized men. And I just want to make it clear that for all of these things, there will be outliers. Like, there will be some women who love that. But I think as a general whole, like you said, we have this balance. So, you know, women are being told, oh, these signs are all bad. But then in reality, that's what they want. And I'm not talking about being abusive, you know, being controlling. I'm talking about stuff like being strong, being a protector. You know, you can probably talk a bit on that.
Yeah, being direct, being forthright, being grounded in who you are, being able to regulate your nervous system, being able to hold space and hold strong and listen to her when she's got problems, etc. You know, what you're saying, it's also true. Women don't like feminine men in the most part. As you said, obviously there are an exception. Women as a whole do not like feminine men because most women are feminine and the feminine is attracted to the masculine. And this is why most men like feminine women. And you can see this. This is out here where I am in Thailand, right? There are so many guys out here. And a big part of the reason that so many of them say they're here is because the women are more in touch with their femininity. There's loads of Russians here as well. And Russia has very traditional gender roles that are quite sexist as far as I'm concerned. But you see it, the Russian women, they like strong, masculine men, and the women are very, very feminine. And we can see in the West now the consequences of this narrative being pushed that men need to be more feminine because it's not what women are attracted to. And they're complaining about the fact that they can't find decent partners now. And it's like, well, what do you fucking expect? You know, masculine, what do women find attractive? When a man is confident and can approach you and be direct and take the lead, but you've told them that they're an offender, that it's dangerous and that it's predatory if they approach you and talk to you directly, but actually at your core, you like it, you're attracted to it. So, you know, it's ridiculous because at the same time as well, women have basically been told to behave more like men, be more masculine, which isn't what most women really want to do either. Now, I'm not one of these people. I'm not a tradcon at all. I want to make that really clear. Like, I don't believe that it's like, yeah, it needs to be the man who provides and the woman in the house and that's perfect, right? I would want my woman to have a job and to have ambition. But actually a lot of women, that's not their focus, especially as they get older. And you can see this particularly with women when they get into their 30s and they have a time limit on their body, right? They want masculine men. They want a strong, stable man who is going to look after them and be a good father to their children, who's going to be able to provide, who's going to be able to be stable, that isn't going to cause instability in the family, that is a good role model to the kids. These things, that is masculinity, and that is something that most of them find attractive. But this idea that's being pushed that is bad and that's how it shouldn't be, it's just so fucking counterintuitive, and we're seeing the consequences of it. And again, like you said, you know, are behind closed doors, are they saying it? Yes, they are. Women like masculine men. Like, I can say all these offensive things, but if I'm grounded and like I'm direct with them, they like it, right? I've seen it with my own fucking eyes, and if I see it with the other people. So we genuinely do need to get back in touch with the things that make us what we are. And of course, yeah, if you're a man who's more feminine, that's perfectly okay as well. That's perfectly fine. If you're a woman who's more masculine, that's fine. But let's stop fucking pretending that the majority of men aren't masculine and the majority of women aren't feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like people just need to understand the concept of sort of statistical averages. Do you know what I mean? Because as soon as you start talking about this, they will go towards that, oh my God, you want a trad wife type thing. But the honest answer is, like, you know, when you look at these missions for companies to have a 50% boardroom of execs, the reality is that you just meet less women that want to be CEOs and want to have this super stressful, status hungry job. men love status in general. All this. So we could talk about that so much more.
Risk as well. Risk is a huge part. Like this, I'll very briefly say, I don't know if you saw my video where I called out Grace Beverly for the shit that she always pushes. I really respect Grace Beverly because she's a very, very intelligent and driven woman, but she persistently pushes this narrative that women are equal to men in terms of things like risk taking, and that we can have it that there are as many female entrepreneurs as there are men. It's biologically proven that men take risk more often. And that's how it has been. It's been shown that women generally aren't as concerned with doing these things. And if you look at companies that are male dominant, they grow faster, but they're more likely to go bankrupt. Whereas female dominant companies, they grow a lot slower, but they're a lot more stable. These kind of things, right? Yeah. You've got Grace Beverly trying to spin that it's the other way. Part of the reason that you see less women on the board and heading up companies is because most women don't have that same drive and risk appetite, like you said. And this is one of these things that it shouldn't be controversial to say this. It's okay. That's fine that it is that way. Sure. Allow women to compete, and the ones that do come up to do it, right? Encourage them, give them the means to do it. But let's stop pretending that there's an equal desire for career success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we really have overstepped this kind of move away from our biology. And it all comes down to just evolutionary strategy. At the end of the day, we're mammals, and these things play out. And it's funny, it's so true about wokeism being a religion, because they're very good at holding, dissonant thoughts in their mind at the same time, because they'll be obsessed with this, gender's a social construct, men and women are the same. But then, you don't see women sending unsolicited vag pics all the time to random men, as in men aren't doing that because they were taught it. They were doing it because of their sex drives, and that's something. It's like women have now tried to educate the world on their menstrual cycle and all this stuff, which is important, but they're very not curious about the male sex drive and what that does to a man, and how it needs to be managed in a healthy way.
They're so different, and this is a thing that I tried to touch on as well. Like a lot of the research that I'm doing, the stuff that I listen to is around like being grounded in your sexuality and understanding your libido, right? Because a lot of men they don't, like, they either have repressed sexuality or they behave in ways that aren't really masculine. They're immature is the way that I'd say it. But again, biologically proven, the male sex drive is much higher than women, and sexual desire works differently. For men, it is pretty much, are you fit physically? And you see women will say, oh, you're objectifying us. No, it's because men literally do just see tits and arse and they're like, bing, like, yes. Whereas with women, there's so much more to it. It's like you have to earn their trust. You have to show value in different ways. Can you make her feel safe? There's a lot more boxes that need to be ticked off, right? And you can see this again, like prime example, 50 Shades of Grey, really, really successful piece of erotic literature, primarily female buyers. Why? Because it's imaginative. It gets them thinking, and that taps into the female libido. Whereas men, porn, boobs, go, like, and similar thing with the gay community as well. Gay men are so direct, and there's no way near as much of the strings attached. It's a lot more common for them to just meet and be like, yeah, sure, let's go for it. Right? You can see that.
I say this a lot. Men and women kind of there's a tension between, like, the man has to provide commitment to the woman in order for her to provide the sex. That's kind of the general, pact. But it's just, you can see that gender is not socially constructed all too easily when you look at gay men, because they don't have any safeguards against that. As in, it's a free for all. Now, this is not the case. Like, for me, I'm in a monogamous relationship, and I like that, but it's something I chose for myself as well. But you really see, like, gay men have just, in some ways, kind of completely lost the plot with that, because there's no one necessarily saying no. Now, whether that's a good or bad thing, that's another story.